We kind of mentioned about these different entity types and some that are actual entity types, whereas, for example, sole proprietorship is not actually an entity type legally. However, it's something you'll reference and you'll say that, yes, I have a sole proprietorship. Now, these are going to be entities that can be formed without filing, and filing what? Well, filing paperwork with the state. One note is that you file with a state, not the federal government. That's one thing to note here, is that when you're creating any of these legal entity types, if you have to file something, you're filing with the state of New York, Delaware, Missouri, California, whatever it may be, not with the federal government. Now, only a partnership or sole proprietorship can be formed without filing organizational documents with the state. All other entity types require some sort of document filing with the state. Now, for example, in those types of questions that I mentioned, where you have to recommend what type of entity someone should create, if this person says they don't want to deal with filing, then it looks like their options are either a partnership or a sole proprietorship. That's just some ways that we will see those questions being asked, whether it's multiple choice questions or SIMs. Let's talk about those partnerships and sole proprietorships. These are formed without filing any formal organizational documents with the state. They're generally easier and less expensive to set up. I mean, yeah, it makes sense. If you don't have to file anything, it's probably going to be easier and less expensive. Now, a sole proprietorship, this is the most simple form of business. It is owned and operated by a single individual. Yeah, I mean, you could probably go, create a whole entity. It's not a legal entity, but you could operate a whole business probably as a sole proprietorship, hire employees. But there's a certain point at which you're going to need to create a legal entity for liability protection. Maybe you get cheaper rates to get insurance for your employees. There's going to be a certain point where it just makes sense to create an entity. However, if you're not really worried about hiring employees, you're not worried about legal liabilities, anything like that, then you're not really probably going to worry about creating an entity. But a key point here, there's no legal distinction between the owner and the business. So, for example, if a corporation such as Apple commits massive fraud, dumps trash in the ocean, right, gets sued for that, no one person is on the hook. The company's on the hook for that. But if you have a sole proprietorship and you do any of those things, you personally are on the hook because there's no legal distinction between the owner and the business. So you are the business. If the business does anything wrong, you're on the hook. Sorry to say that. Now, to start a sole proprietorship, you only need to obtain any necessary licenses and permits for the industry or the activity. But if there's no permits or anything like that, you don't need to do that. That would be, let's say you want to start getting into the CPA exam review course industry. Not that I know anything about that, but you usually wouldn't need to do anything other than get approval by the ASCPA and whoever you need to work with. But for example, let's say you want to start dog walking as a business. I personally can't say I've ever started a dog walking business. However, I don't really know if there's any permits or licenses you would need to do that. However, if you do need to get those from some organization, as long as you get those, but let's just say there's no licenses or permits, then you could just start your business and that's it. You just literally start doing business activity today and that's it. If your business is driving for Uber or Lyft, as long as you have your driver's license and permit and everything for your car, you're good to go. Now, let's talk about general partnerships. A general partnership is formed when two or more people come together to conduct business for profit, unless you're doing a nice little non-for-profit there. We have a whole lesson on that. The formation of a general partnership does not require any formal documents to be filed with the state. It can be created by an oral or written agreement between the partners, or even by the mere conduct of the partners in carrying out the business. We'll talk about that as well. If two individuals just start doing business together, it's kind of like common law marriage, if anyone's familiar with that. You don't have to legally be married, but at a certain point, the government considers you married because you're essentially conducting the business or activities of being married. You're living together. You're doing everything together. It's kind of like that. We're dealing with two individuals or more just conducting business together. At a certain point, it's almost as if you have that partnership. But again, generally speaking, if you have a formal partnership, you're going to make a written agreement or a formal written agreement. Yeah, you can make an oral agreement, but as they say, always get it down in writing for sure. But again, you don't need to file anything with the state like that to create the entity. But if you are conducting business as a partnership, you will need to file with the IRS, a nice 1065. Talking here about these other types of entities, and within partnerships, we've got a lot of different types of partnerships. We see limited partnerships, general partnerships. We'll talk about those and the distinctions for sure. You want to know those. Talking about these types of entities, well, these types of business entities are going to require formal registration with the state by filing organizational documents. I would generally be familiar with the types of documents that need to be filed. For example, a corporation, you got to file the articles of incorporation. For an LLC, you have to file articles of organization. Just Yeah, I'd be familiar with those. It's not going to be critically important. Probably not going to be asked too many questions on that, but you might get one question that say, what's the name of the document that needs to be filed to form an LLC? Now you know. With the corporation, you're generally going to need to file with the Secretary of State, not the federal Secretary of State, but with the Secretary of State of the state that you're filing in. Now, this document is going to contain essential information about the corporation, such as its name, purpose, registered agent, and details about its stock structure. We will talk about this as well. Within the corporation lesson, we're going to look at some tax forms, kind of see what you need to do in order to get this off the ground. Now, in LLC, articles of organization, make sure you know that. This document also is going to include important pieces of information, such as the name, the address of its registered office, the name of the registered agent, generally going to be like who's in charge of dealing with the legality of it all. Could be you as the CEO, or you just hire someone to deal with it for you, and information about its management structure. For an LP, a limited partnership, you are going to get a certificate of limited partnership or a similar document and file with the state. Now, the document typically is going to include the names, and the addresses of the general partners, and the purpose of the LP and other relevant information. And we're going to see, again, like I said, whether it's just a lot of practice through this lesson or the partnerships lessons as well. We're going to really compare the different types of partnerships and see how they commingle and intertwine with each other. Lots of important points to know. Hey there! Are you ready to not only pass your CPA exams, but truly understand and enjoy the material while studying? I know it seems impossible, right? Especially to enjoy the material? We'll do it together. Tap into the power of CPA.examprep.ai, where we've got personalized quizzes, multiple choice questions, memorization guides, flashcards, simulations, all tailored to your learning. Our adaptive study planning puts you on the fastest path to success and lifts you back up if you fall behind. Avoid wasting your precious time and money attempting an exam with a low chance of passing, because who wants that? We want to get you through this process as quick as possible. Our exam readiness prediction lets you walk in with confidence, knowing that you're prepared for success on exam day. Thankfully, there's no payment method needed to get started, so why don't you come join us? Visit cpa.examprep.ai and let's achieve your exam success together.